Imagine you slip on ice. Your leg snaps below the knee. The pain is instant, blinding. In a hospital, you'd get an X-ray within the hour, a cast by evening, painkillers to get you through the night. Now take away the hospital, take away the cast, take away every doctor who has ever lived. That was reality for every human on Earth until roughly 100 years ago. And yet, tens of thousands of years before that, one man's bones tell a story that should have been impossible. In 1957, archaeologist Ralph Selecki was excavating a cave in the Zagros Mountains of northern Iraq, a site called Shanidar. There, buried under layers of rock and time, he found a skeleton that would rewrite what we thought we knew about prehistoric survival. Researchers named him Shanidar I. He was a Neanderthal man, and his body was a record of catastrophic injury. His right arm was withered and useless. The bone shows it had been broken so badly, so long ago, that it had partially reabsorbed into his body. His skull bore a crushing blow above the left eye, likely leaving him blind on that side. His hearing was almost certainly gone in both ears, the bone canals deformed by growths triggered by repeated cold water exposure. And his right leg, the injury that should have ended him fastest, had been fractured, then healed, in a foot that showed signs he had likely lost the ability to walk normally for the rest of his life. Here's what should change how you see this species we call primitive. Every one of those injuries shows healed bone. Not fresh breaks, healed ones, which means he didn't die from any of them. He lived, for years, maybe decades, with a body that could not hunt, could not defend itself, and in a modern setting would qualify for full-time care. A one-armed, half-blind, mostly deaf man with a shattered leg does not survive alone in the Ice Age. Not for one winter, let alone several. Something, or someone, kept him alive. In 1971, anthropologist T. Dale Stewart re-examined Shanidar I's remains and confirmed what Selecki had suspected. This man had lived roughly 35 to 45 years, an extraordinary age for a Neanderthal, most of whom died before 30. He had carried his injuries for what may have been half his life. Think about what that actually requires. Someone had to bring him meat he couldn't hunt. Someone had to guide him around a cave system he couldn't fully see. Someone had to keep him near the fire through winters that killed healthy men. Every single day, for years, a group of Neanderthals chose to keep this man alive, even though he offered them nothing in return. No labor, no defense, no resources. For decades, scientists dismissed Neanderthals as brutish, instinct-driven, barely capable of language. Shanidar I became the first hard evidence that this was wrong. Selecki himself called it proof of something almost unthinkable for the time: compassion, deep in our evolutionary past, in a species we'd spent a century mocking as subhuman. But Shanidar wasn't a one-off. In 2010, researchers Penny Spikins, Holly Rutherford, and Andy Needham published an analysis of Neanderthal skeletal remains across multiple sites and found the same pattern repeating. At La Chapelle-aux-Saints in France, a Neanderthal skeleton dated to around 60,000 years ago showed near-total tooth loss and severe arthritis, a man who physically could not chew tough meat, yet had clearly been fed for years. At Shanidar itself, other individuals showed healed amputations and skull trauma that should have been fatal without care. This wasn't one compassionate tribe. It was a pattern, repeated across tens of thousands of years, on opposite sides of a continent. There's a third case that makes this even harder to explain away. At Krapina, in modern-day Croatia, researchers examined Neanderthal remains dated to around 130,000 years ago, tens of thousands of years before Shanidar. Among them was a forearm bone showing a partially healed fracture, set at an angle that suggests something remarkable. The bone may have been deliberately splinted, immobilized long enough to knit back together. If that reading is correct, it pushes the origin of medical care back further than almost anyone expected. Not a late development in human history, but something close to the core of who we've always been. But here's where it gets stranger, because caring for the injured wasn't an act of pure kindness. It came at a brutal cost. Every hour spent carrying Shanidar I, feeding him, keeping him near the fire, was an hour not spent hunting, not spent gathering, not spent watching for predators. In a world where a single bad season could starve an entire group, caring for someone who could not contribute was not a small decision. It was a repeated, collective sacrifice made by people whose own survival was never guaranteed. Researchers estimate a functioning adult in this era needed to secure roughly 2,000 to 3,000 calories a day through relentless physical effort. Shanidar I could not do this. For years, his share came from someone else's labor, food quite literally taken out of another person's mouth to keep him alive. And it wasn't only physical care. Anthropologists studying these sites point to something harder to measure, but just as important. To keep a severely disabled man alive for decades, a group needs memory, planning, and division of labor stretched across years, not days. Someone had to remember winter after winter that this man needed extra warmth, extra food, extra watching. That kind of sustained, coordinated effort implies something we rarely credit Ice Age humans with: foresight, and a shared sense of obligation to someone who could never repay it. And yet they did it. Not once, not for a season, for years, possibly decades, across multiple sites, across tens of thousands of years of prehistory. We tend to think empathy is a modern invention, something that arrived with hospitals, with charities, with civilization itself. Shanidar I's bones say otherwise. Compassion wasn't built by comfort. It was carried by people who had almost nothing, through winters that killed the healthy, for a man who could give nothing back. The next time you help someone who cannot repay you, you are not doing something uniquely modern. You are doing something tens of thousands of years old.